This might surprise a lot of you, but I actually wasn't. Leave the World Behind is undoubtedly a movie that you're either gonna love or downright hate. My final thoughts after finally watching it last night is that I honestly love this movie. But a lot of people expressed in the comments that they were very confused and didn't understand the ending. Luckily, I think I do. And there were a lot of subliminal messages that you guys might want to know about. So here are a few of my theories, as well as the symbolism that I caught throughout the movie. But first, a warning, this video is definitely going to contain some spoilers. So save this video and come back later if you still haven't seen it yet. So let's start off by talking about Rose and Archie as well as what they're wearing. Rose, the 13-year-old daughter, was wearing a NASA t-shirt when she started to notice the strange things happening around her. And of course, she wanted to explore more, being drawn to the woods as well as that house on the hill. In my opinion, it's definitely giving NASA and their curiosity, as well as their purpose of space exploration. While on the other hand, her brother Archie was sporting the Obey and the Rockstar t-shirts. And as you've seen in the film, Archie was very much distracted by, I guess, his temptation, and basically didn't take Rose's concerns seriously. In my opinion, this is possibly speaking to the typical teenagers and young adults in our time. You know, the ones who would even know what Rockstar and Obey are. I'm theorizing that these kids are the symbolism of the two different types of people in the world. Those who are distracted by their addictions, their vices, their temptations, and those who see what's happening and want to find out more, or escape altogether. Speaking of escaping, the ending definitely reminded me of those people who prepared to go to another planet once they heard the world was ending. And that might have been back in like 2011. But Rose basically said, I'm done waiting for help. I'm gonna enjoy my last little bit of time on Earth. And she really left them. But let's back it up and talk about another thing that I noticed. One of the first incidents that happened in this movie was the White Lion ship crashing on the beach. But did you know the White Lion was actually the name of the first ship to bring abducted and enslaved Africans to America? Specifically to the English colony of Virginia back in 1619. Maybe it was symbolism of what was to come later on in the movie. And I'm talking about the tension between Amanda and her two unexpected guests at her vacation rental home. I'm thinking that it represents the racial biases and tension that's happening in our real world. Because Amanda could not believe that two black people could have owned that beautiful mansion, regardless of how much they proved that it was theirs. And she clearly did not want them to stay there with her and her family. Not until everyone let their guard down. Amanda and GH bonded over a few drinks and music, and Clay and Ruth shared a vape together. And not until they could let that bias and tension go, were they able to have a productive conversation about what could be happening. Before I dive deeper into the musical symbolism as well as the ending, I want to talk about one other message I found. And this one is obvious. It's technology. This is a basic one that most people should have picked up on. Throughout the entire movie, there was symbolism of how distracted we are with our phones and our devices, and also how we feel useless without them. Clay getting lost driving on the road, Rose not caring about the state of emergency that's going on and just wanting to watch Friends. Everyone the entire time checking their phones or trying to use their devices knowing there's a blackout. It speaks to how reliant we've become on technology, and how many people will fail to know how to function if we lost it all. And speaking of technology, let's talk about the record player. Considering what was in the gift box that Netflix sent to me, and all the different times that it was placed on screen, for example, the driveway to GH's house, Clay's t-shirt which had its own meaning within itself, and the vinyl library within the home, it's clear that the record player symbolizes something. Music is known to bring people together around the world. We bond over it every single day. So I have to think that it ties into an idea of friendship and togetherness, because that was the only time that GH and Amanda actually got along. From the beginning to the end of the movie, friendship and togetherness was referenced, especially with Rose's obsession with the show Friends. Some speculate that this is connected to something deeper and darker. Considering Matthew Perry's tragic passing as well as Doja Cat's recent release, referencing the show, I get why people say that, but I'm not too sure. I tried to look into the specific episode that Rose was super obsessed with. And here's the basic synopsis that I found. The six friends prepare to part ways and set out on the next chapters of their lives, with momentous events and surprises in store. GH, Ruth, Amanda, Clay, Archie, Rose, 6 people. I'm thinking that they were hinting at a part 2, especially considering the ending. But unfortunately, we will not know until they tell us. If you look at the context clues of the 3 situations at the end, you could probably guess why it is so significant now, and maybe even what might happen next. First, Clay, GH, and Archie are trying to get help from this overprotective gun-wielding man. And it's because Archie is now very sick. Isn't that a little strange? The one who was distracted got hit with sickness first? And in my opinion, this man definitely represents gun enthusiasts of America, especially with the red maple tree outside of his house, symbolizing protection, strength, and also him sporting the cowboy's hat, which are clues in itself. If you don't know, that's Texas. Once GH and Clay pleaded with him and convinced him to help, they learned that he believes that it's the Koreans who are behind what's happening, whereas they think it's people from Iran, based solely on the evidence that Clay retrieved in an earlier incident. But the man insists, claiming that his friend managed to get the same paper that they have, and concluded that it was definitely a country from Asia. So he suggested that they're all working together to dismantle the US. Once they get back in the car, GH has an information-heavy monologue, which basically states that it's very possible what the man said was correct. Every event that took place was planned, and was all to lead to some civil warfare, where they will all end up tearing each other apart. Now he wants to make sure that Clay will essentially stay his friend throughout this entire chaos, and makes him agree that they will not turn their backs against each other, especially because things are about to go to sugar honey iced tea. Then we have Amanda and Ruth, who clearly disliked each other throughout the entire movie. But when it came down to the terrifying event with the deer in the forest, they ended up working together to get out of it, which ended up bringing them a little bit closer, which also could be accredited to Ruth's vulnerability when speaking to Amanda about how she feels. And at the same time, they find out the chaos that's happening in the city. Now finally, Rose. She was just the overall message. All she wanted to do was see the season finale of Friends. But here's where I think that this all ties together. It's the final episode of Friends, so maybe it's tying into what GH said. A civil war is upon them. There is no more friends. Everyone is fending for themselves now. And that's basically what Rose did anyways. Even after hearing her mother calling her name, she ended up going downstairs and finding a bunker with plenty of food and water. And did she go back upstairs to tell them about it? No. She selfishly sat down and finished that final episode. And that was after she consumed all the food that was inside of the kitchen. Clearly a reference to gluttony. Oh, in conclusion, the ending is brilliant in my opinion. First of all, Rose's anxiety about finding out what happened at the season finale of Friends was recreated at the end of the movie. But this time, we were Rose and we wanted to know what happened to these 6 strangers that we spent 2 hours getting to know. And second, this all ties into the whole theory of this revolving around togetherness and friendship when there's chaos. And the only way to have that friendship and togetherness is letting those guards down, letting those tensions and biases go, and being able to communicate with each other. I have to give this movie a solid 9.5 out of 10. Honestly, I love the dialogue. The cinematography was beautiful, and the soundtrack was a personal plus for me. As you can see, I was diving deep into this movie. And I could be wrong about some of the details, some of it might be a stretch, but clearly it was an interesting watch for me. If you've seen it, I definitely want to know your thoughts, so let me know in the comment section.
Imagine that this folder is a dimensional plane. Now, assuming that it is no height and no depth, what would this mean? It would mean that it's a one-dimensional world. So if, hypothetically, an organism was living inside of it, it would only be able to move in a linear path forward and backwards in a straight line. Now, if we go to the second dimension, we have 2 dimensions. We have width and we have length. So hypothetically, if an organism lived inside of here, then it would be able to move up, down, left, right, and anywhere else in between. And a 2-dimensional world is comprised of an infinite series of 1-dimensional worlds stacked upon each other. Just as our 3-dimensional world, which has depth, and length, and height, is comprised of an infinite series of 2-dimensional worlds. So, now that I've stacked many folders upon each other, we have 3 dimensions. We have depth, we have length, and we have width. Now what happens if you keep going on from here on out? We would have a 4-dimensional world, but what exactly is the 4th dimension? In order to understand this, we need to understand how dimensions are perceived. We live in the 3-dimensional world, but despite that, we actually view things to be 2-dimensionally. Take a perfect sphere, for example. If you're looking at a sphere, it looks just like a regular 2-dimensional circle. The only way that you can tell it's an actual sphere instead of a circle is because of the hues of light on it. So just like in a 2-dimensional world, if a organism in the two-dimensional world was looking upon a circle, the light would make it appear to be lighter at one end and darker in the middle. Also, if an object is moving closer and farther away from you, you don't actually perceive that it's getting closer and farther away. You see that it's getting smaller or larger, and then you assume that it's getting either farther away or closer. But let's say that an object was to grow in perfect equilibrium, so that it was growing at the same speed that it was shrinking as you move it farther away. Then you would not be able to tell, without any lights or if there were details on the object, that it's moving or growing at all. You may have assumed that since we perceive things to be in 2 dimensions, that a 2-dimensional organism would see in 1 dimension. So, as we're watching this rubber band expand as it moves farther away from this little organism in the 2-dimensional world, it does not actually perceive anything is happening to it, because it's growing at the same speed that it's moving farther away. But since we can actually see it from the 3-dimensional world and perceive things to be in 2 dimensions, we can see things for how they actually are. The reason that the 2-dimensional organism doesn't see things the way they really are is because the 2-dimensional organism sees things in 1 dimension, just how we, 3-dimensional creatures, see things in 2 dimensions. So in a way, we don't really see our world the way it truly is. A 4-dimensional creature, however, seeing our 3-dimensional world in 3 dimensions, would be able to see through things, would be able to see absolutely everything, just as we could see if there was several organisms spread along a 2D environment on your floor. You'd be able to see inside houses, you would be able to see inside of people. So if a 2-dimensional world, a flat surface, is just made of an infinite amount of lines, then the 3D world is just made out of an infinite amount of planes. So the 4D world, logically, is made out of an infinite amount of 3D objects, though they're not just put together like you would like building blocks. That's not how the 4D world is. That would just be 3D again. So in order to understand this, we need to understand the logical progression of mathematics in our world. Imagine that this connects piece represents the first dimension. It's simply a straight line, which is basically what the first dimension looks like. And if you add 3 more of these straight lines and connect them so that adjacent sides are perpendicular and opposite sides are parallel, then you have the basic shape of the second dimension. You have a square. Now if you keep going from here, and you add it so that there's a total of 4 squares, and all adjacent sides are perpendicular, and all opposite sides are parallel, then you end up with, obviously, a cube. So, if you tried to keep going from here, and you would have a 4-dimensional basic shape, you would have what's called a tesseract. Now, I cannot show you a tesseract, but you need to understand that it's basically 4 cubes that are within each other that have all adjacent sides perpendicular and all opposite sides parallel. Yet there are 4 lines connecting to each vertex. So a tesseract would look somewhat like this picture. Now, that's not exactly what it looks like, because this is a 2-dimensional depiction, and obviously not all the lines are straight. So, I cannot show you what a tesseract actually looks like, because we cannot perceive things in the 3rd dimension. You cannot even imagine what a tesseract looks like. You cannot in your mind picture the 4th dimension or a 4th dimensional shape. And you can keep going on from the 4th dimension even. You can go to the 5th dimension, the 6th dimension, the 71st dimension. It doesn't matter. Theoretically, there are an infinite amount of spatial dimensions. A common misconception of the 4th dimension is that the 4th dimension is time. Now, while some argue that by going forward and backwards in time, if you move forward the same distance and backwards the same, then you would end up in the same place you started, just like in the 4th dimension. And while that may seem logical, if you think about it, it really doesn't make sense. If you imply that the 4th dimension is actually time, well, first of all, time is not spatial. There's a difference between space and time, quite obviously. And assuming that all dimensions are according to a pattern, then that doesn't really make sense either, because saying the 4th dimension is time, every dimension has time in it, so that would mean that the 4th dimension is special in some way, which doesn't really make any sense. Another reason this doesn't make sense is that we very, very, very slightly travel through time whenever we move due to the distance that light takes to get to our body. Now, if a group of astronauts were to get in a spaceship and they were to go very, very, very close to the speed of light, then they went around in this impossible, nearly the speed of light spaceship for a few months, and then afterwards they returned to Earth. They would find that Earth had actually progressed a few years, so they had moved forward in time by moving that quickly. Another interesting concept involving the 4th dimension is that many physicists and even mathematicians may say that the dimensions are very, very slightly curved, because if you really think about it, nothing can be truly, absolutely infinite. So imagine that the first dimension, the line, is just very, very slightly curved, so that after a very long time, it will end up creating a circle. So, as suggested by many physicists, if you keep going in the same direction, then you will end up where you started after a very, very long amount of time, obviously. And the same thing would happen to the second dimension. If it's just a square, and then you extend it very, very slightly in a curve, and it will eventually make a sphere, and the same thing happens in our dimension, except it will form a very, very slightly curved, third dimension, which will form a four-dimensional universe, basically. So what this kind of means is that our three-dimensional world is within a four-dimensional world, and the four-dimensional world is within a fifth-dimensional world, and so on. Now, I did say that nothing can be truly infinite, but if this is true, and a dimension is really within another dimension, within another dimension, within another dimension, then I'm implying that there's an infinite amount of dimensions, which is the only problem I really have with this theory. I'm not sure if it ever stops, or if infinity is really even possible. We don't know that. Thanks for watching my video, and I hope this gave you a better idea of what the fourth dimension is.
The Mayans correctly predicted the end of the world. We've all seen the movie 2012. Instead of getting floods and global cataclysm, we're experiencing a metaphysical reformation. Mayans had observatories, closely monitored celestial bodies. They closely followed the precession of the equinoxes. Fast forward 1,000 years, and Plato discovers the Great Year, calendar based on the precession of the equinoxes. Jesus' life was symbolically the start of the age of Pisces. Why do you think his symbol is a fish? We've now entered the age of Aquarius, the age of harmony, unity, and elevated consciousness. Mayans didn't predict the end of the world. They predicted the start of a new one.
Everybody died in 2012, and we're all sharing a consciousness. So we're on a shared consciousness, and everybody's dead, and they're reliving their memories in a dreamlike state. So the 7 minutes after you die, 7 minutes, your brain is still active for 7 minutes, but time is relative. So 7 minutes in a dream could be like
your whole life.
100 years in real time. So yeah, the theory is that everybody died in 2012. We're all in a dreamlike state, reliving, like everything that's going on right now is just fake. It's just a memory and you're dreaming it. And that's why the Mandela effect is a thing.
This day may be the last day of your life. In fact, April 13th, 2029. An asteroid named Apophis is going to pass so close to our Earth that it is scary to think about it. And its size is 340 meters, which is going to pass 31,000 kilometers away from us. Let me tell you that geostationary satellites orbit our Earth from a distance of 36,000 kilometers. That is, this asteroid is even less than that. The asteroid is about to pass by our Earth, which is bigger than the Eiffel Tower. And if it hits our Earth, it could cause more destruction than 100 nuclear booms. But NASA says that this asteroid poses no threat to us.
Did you know that if the moon disappeared for just 12.6 seconds, the world as we know it would be doomed? The Earth would rotate 3 times as fast, and each day would be 8 hours long. Winds would also be strong enough to blow the roofs off the top of houses. Birds and insects will implode due to atmospheric pressure. Eventually, ocean tides will lead to the flooding of almost every city in the planet, and this will cause the extinction of all humans. And even if the flooding doesn't do it, eventually the Earth would burn up from its core, killing everyone.
So you think Earth's coming to an end?
That is a certainty. It's just a question of when. If nothing else happens, the sun will expand and boil the oceans and kill all life on Earth.
Wait, because the sun's expanding? Like it's growing?
Yeah, it's expanding. You know, things could get a bit dicey in 500 million years. Well, it's not going to be in our lifetimes or anything close to it. But I'm just saying that if you think very long term, then the extinction of Earth is a certainty. If nothing else happens to destroy all life on Earth, that will definitely happen. In the fossil record, there are arguably 5 great extinction events. A great extinction event would be like, I don't know, 70, 80% of all species on Earth are destroyed. And there was one particular extinction, the Permian extinction. It's like maybe 90, 95% of all species were destroyed, which frankly doesn't tell the whole story, because most of what remained were like fungus and fungi and things like, not, you know, unless are you a mushroom or a cockroach or whatever, you know, no large life was survived, or almost no large life. So permanent extinction took out almost everything.
So apparently the world's about to end.
What?
Yeah, in 2023, there's signs of the ends of times, according to the Prophet Muhammad, who lived 14,000 years ago. He lived in Saudi Arabia, and everything he said is coming true right now.
What did he say?
He said the end of the world will not come until the hour in which the land of the Arabs returns to be in meadows and rivers.
Okay, so?
So look, if you look around the desert land of Saudi Arabia right now, like literally, get a picture on Google, look at it. They're starting to turn green again, like the whole desert. Starting to grow grass, trees, and have heavy rainfall like they never had before.
No.
Now look at the Prophet said that it would return. So scientists did some research and found that the Arabian Peninsula was in fact filled with meadows and rivers tens of thousands of years ago. So yeah, it seems like his prophecies might be coming true.
I can't die. I'm still a virgin.
That's all you care about? That's what we're worried about? I'm done.
How many would die if the moon hit Earth?